sell haphazardly. Trading is like a sport. If you want to become a champion, if you want to become an athlete, you have to know the rules, and then you have to exercise. You have to do the drills, and the more you do the drills, the better you become at that field of expertise. So the long point means that above it we are going to buy. The short point means below it we're going to sell. The structure long is a trend changing point. That means the structure long point, this means that the market has now changed its trend and now it's going up. The structure short point means that the market has changed the trend and now the trend is down. And these price points, I'm going to save them, I'm going to change them now in the session, and we're going to create a workspace for you that you can see like this, and you need to transpose these numbers on your charts and on your screens, and you use them for making your trading decision next week. Okay, so having said that, now we're going to start specifically in foreign exchange, and based upon our principle, we are only going to buy anything that is strong, and we're also going to sell anything that is weak. So we buy strength and we sell weakness. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to look at the indices, the currency indices, and these indices are what tells us what's happening into the market or into the currency. So I'm looking at the dollar index, and this dollar index is the chart for the US dollar as a basket against all the other currencies. And this way I can gauge if the dollar is strong or the dollar is weak, and where are the structure points for the dollar. And I'm going to take every index by itself. So I'm taking the dollar index, I'm taking the euro index, I'm taking the British pound index, the Aussie index, and based upon those indexes I'm going to gauge which is the strongest pairs, and these will be the ones that I'm looking to buy. And I'm looking which is the strongest currency and the weakest currency, and these are the ones I'm looking to sell. So to start up with, this is the US dollar, and as you can see right here, when we traded above the 76.45 right there for the first time here, that was what we called a structure point. This was a structure point, and that breakup to the upside was the beginning of what we can call a long-term uptrend. We reached the structure point, the other structure point, which is here, which is the 81.17. We reached it right there. We passed it a little bit, putting a high of 80.43, and then we sold off. And we had a big sell-off coming back all the way down, back to the 76.45. We went through the 76.74. We came back to this original significant point which we had before, which is the 75.18. We held there, and then we exploded back up again. This is a very positive setup for the US dollar. This is a very good indication. This push up, pulling back to the structure point and then pulling back up again and moving this way to the upside. This is very positive for the US dollar, and based upon what we see here, the dollar now is very strong, and our bias would be that we would be looking to be buying the US pairs, going long the US pairs, and we're going to see which one are the weakest so that we can see which ones we're going to short. So this is the dollar, and we're looking now, one thing I wanted to point for you in the dollar, we have two structure points on the index. One which is the 80.17, and the other one which is the 80.43. And you can see that the distance between those two structure points is about 22 pips or 25 pips, which is the distance between 17 and 43. So basically we're looking at 3, 25 pips, which is the distance between those two major structure points. This is the 8017 right there. And you can see what the market went above it. It really had a very big move to the upside, and when it came back, it tested it, it held right here. So again, this is your second confirmation to the strength of the price point, and when we broke through it, it capitulated. So this is where we're coming back to revisit again the 8017. We closed the week at 79.83. If you look at the weekly chart, you can see how strong the dollar is. We had 3 strong big range explosive weeks, one after the other, and therefore the odds are we should be going to trade to the 8017, and if we trade above the 8043, we should be getting an explosive move to the upside in the US dollar. So we'll be looking to buy into the 8014. We want to be long before it reaches the 8017, because right above the 8017 there will be a bunch of buy stops sitting above here, and if we are in, we want to be triggered before these stops are triggered so that we can join in and have a better entry before the market. So we want to be early in this case rather than being late. The second pair we're going to look at is the British pound. And as you can see here in the British pound, I'm going to put our structure points that we had. You can see on the British pound right here, we have closed the week at 154.32. We had a major structure point right here, which is the 159. We have two structures, one which is the 157.63, and the other structure point is the 160. I'm just putting them for you so that you can see these are the two structure points, and the British pound, the index, have been trading perfectly between between those 2 points. So as you can see, this was the structure point. It went above the 160, it came back, tested. When it broke it, it capitulated. It tested it back for the second time, a failure, and now we have a capitulation to the downside. We sold off all of the week. We had 5 days breaking to the downside, which again shows you how negative the British pound is, and we should be looking to go down. Now we're looking for the next level or the next structure point that we should get to, which is going to be our reference point. And that is the 153.35. So we have about 100 basis points from where the market closed right now to where it should begin to find some sort of support right there. And if you look at the weekly chart for the British pound, this is the major trend versus the dollar is entrenched to the downside, and now we have been trying to move into a consolidation right here. This now, as you can see, it's pretty much what you can consider as a continuation, but this is just a major pause that has been taking place for about a year and a half from 2010 in the pound, and now it is beginning to resolve itself to the downside, and a break below the 153.35 should lead to a major capitulation to the downside in the British pound. And as you can see, it is pretty much that the 153 would probably is going to be the structure point, a break through a structure point, and it's a break in, if you want to look again, we don't use these trend lines, we don't use trend lines, but I just wanted you to give you a visual aid to what it is forming. So that means the major trend is to the downside, and we're looking for the market to come back and test the 135, and if not, to take it and make a lower low. So the pound here is extremely weak. The other pair we're going to look at, the other index we're going to look at, is the euro dollar. And as you can see, we closed the week also at 132.39, and that is pretty much actually worse than the British pound. And you can see how weak this thing is. This is our weekly chart. We had 4 continuous weeks, weekly declines, and if I put the daily chart for you, you can see we are, I mean, this thing is, once it broke the 138.36, as you might recall on the index, it has not, we are now 600 points in the money. We have started shorting it below 138.36, and now we're at 138, 132. We should go down and test this low. This low, based upon the index, is the 132.41, and we're going to match this and see which one it matches with the spot cash. So also the euro is extremely weak. We're also going to look now at the Australian dollar. The Australian dollar is really interesting. I'm using the indices as I said, because they are the basket of the Australian dollar against all the other currencies. This is actually one of the weakest currencies that we have, and it is sitting at a point where we should be having a major breakdown. If you look here, what I'm trying to point for you was the high that was set in 2008, in August 2008. This high that was set in August 2008 based on the index here is 97.70, but when we go to the spot cash, you would see it's the 98.45, and this has been the major break. Once the Australian dollar broke through the 98.45 based upon the index, we had this capitulation to the downside. It lost about 50% of its value. It sold off from 97 to approximately 60. So let's say it lost about 30% of its value. And this is what's happening right here. This is where we are right now. There are two instances here. A break below the 97.70, which we had with strength, got us all the way down to the 93 level, which now going to be our new structure point. That's the 93.02, and based upon the chart structure that we have right now, this is a failure right there, and that is the structure point. And if we break, I don't know for what it is, this missing one day, but now we should be looking for a continuation to the downside, and this here, the 9302, which is the next structure point, this is where the Aussie should go towards, and a break below this one, you can look at a major bear market that should be coming in to the Aussie. But in any case, we should be looking for a test of the 9302, and we have a possible move of about 400 pips to the downside. And that again is a good target for us, and that is also another sign of weakness. So the next one we want to look at is the Japanese yen. And this is quite interesting. The Japanese yen is really quite interesting, and I want you to take a good mental picture of this one, because we will be able to gauge based upon this picture how weak some other currencies are. So take a good look at this one here. We had the structure point of 129.85. We broke below it, and now we closed the week at 128, and that is a pretty weak setup, and therefore we should be looking for the yen, even though the yen is technically or fundamentally one of the strongest currencies, but technically now it is beginning to resolve itself to the downside. And it hasn't, this setup that you see here, we can call it maybe the beginning of a turtle soup or something like that, but you can see the failure or the difficulty that the Japanese yen had in trying to stay above the 129, and now it resolved itself and closing the week at 28.73, and therefore we should be looking at another push towards the 129, the 125.49. Last but not least is the Swiss franc. And this is now an extremely interesting pair. And look at the close here. We closed at 107.55. If you look here at the index, this low is 107.49. I'm going to give it a yellow color so that you can see the difference. We have kind of poked a little bit below the 107.49, and we closed the week, as you can see right there. This is what happened on Friday. We traded below it, and this, as you know, also is Thanksgiving, so we had this sell-off, and this is where we closed at 107.55. The low that we had is 107.05, so basically we broke below the structure point with about 30 points, and we came back and we closed at 107.55. Now looking at this chart, that here is a major sell signal. If we trade below the 107.45 as of tomorrow, then definitely we need to be sure. This is now the currency that is giving us a major sell signal, which is now a structural sell and a short entry. So if I'm going to do my plan now, which ones I'm going to buy and which ones I'm going to sell, well, here's the plan. The strongest currency that I have so far is the US dollar, and the the all the other currencies are on a sell mode versus the dollar. So if I'm looking again, let me show you. So now as you can see, this is a major sell signal, and that's a trend change below the 107.49. If you look at the Australian dollar, we have, as I said, we have traded below the 97.9. So that also gives us, it is below now this 96.77. Your structure point is the 97.77. So this is also a major sell signal. If you look at the euro, this is also the weakest, so that's extremely weak, and the same thing with the British pound. So if I'm going to go back to my setup to see which ones I'm going to be shorting, it didn't save my text. Okay. So my strongest currency thus far is the US dollar, and the weakest now, so basically I want to be buying the dollar and selling everything else. The weakest that I'm going to sell at is the Swiss franc upon a trade below the 107. Then I want to be selling the euro, is also very weak, and then I want to be selling the British pound and the Australian dollar. So basically I want to be looking at buying the dollar, selling the Swiss, buying the dollar, selling the euro, or short euro dollar, short the pound dollar, and short the Aussie dollar. And also I want to be selling the Japanese yen versus the dollar. So these will be my primary setup. I'll be looking to buying the dollar and selling the Swiss, selling the euro, selling the pound, selling the Aussie. That if I'm using only the dollar. What else can I trade? I can then take the Swiss franc. I'm just gonna put them for you here so you see what I'm doing. Okay, I'm doing this so that you can see what we're. So basically, I'm going to go long the dollar and short all of this, and then if I'm looking at this chart here, I can do. We know that the Swiss now is pretty much at the break of a selling point, so I can go short the Swiss versus the pound. So I can go long the pound Swiss. I can go long the Aussie Swiss. I can go long the yen Swiss. But if you look at the euro dollar, I will probably be staying away from going short the euro dollar, because now we know that the euro is pegged against the Swiss franc at 125, so we're not going to try to short the euro Swiss. We might try to go long the euro Swiss. Okay, we can also look at trying to take the, not sure about the pound Aussie and the pound CAD, But primarily this is what are going to be our focus for today. We're going to be looking at buying the dollar, selling the Swiss, buying the dollar, selling the euro, buying the dollar, selling the pound, buying the dollar, selling the Aussie and the Japanese yen. And on the other part, when I take crosses, we're going to take cross, we're going to go long the pound Swiss, we can go long the Aussie Swiss, we can go long, I'm going to stay away from the yen Swiss, and I might look at trying to take the CAD Swiss and the Euro Swiss. Okay, this is the primary pairs that we're going to look at tonight. So let me save the recording